Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Stone Chapel Podcast. I'm David Capes. Ed Stetzer joins me today on this podcast to talk about an effort he is leading from his platform at Biola University in Southern California. It's called Lead the Way Tour, and it may be coming to a city near you. What is it? Well, Ed, David Kinnaman of Barna, Nicole Martin of Christianity Today, and John Plake of the American Bible Society are going around the country discussing in churches and colleges and other campuses essentially the state of the church. They're employing the best and the up-to-date data about culture from Barna and Glue. They have lots of great free resources they're going to be providing pastors and church leaders. The Lead the Way Tour is coming to the Lanier Theological Library on June the 21st, 2025. You can go online and register. You just go to biola.edu/lead the way. That's biola.edu/lead the way. And you can find about other dates and such. They're going to be in other places too. It comes to you at no cost. Because it's free, you ask? No, because it's paid for by somebody else. That's grace. If you care about the church and the culture, and who doesn't, this is an excellent place to find out the state of things. Now, the Stone Chapel Podcast is part of the Church Leaders Podcast Network, and we are dedicated to helping pastors and church leaders lead the way. We are living in tumultuous times: confusion, deconstruction, political division, hypocrisy, lots of mental health challenges. How do you lead the way in developing faithful, resilient disciples of Jesus? The next 15 minutes will show you how you can get started. So today, entrepreneur, academic, leader, author, podcaster, radio show host, I could go on, but also an all-around good guy, Ed Stetzer, on the Stone Chapel Podcast.
Ed Stetzer, the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University.
Dr. Ed Stetzer. Ed, good to see you. Welcome back to the Stone Chapel Podcast.
The coolest named podcast in all the world with one of my favorite New Testament scholars. So good to be here with you, David.
Oh, man, it's exciting. And what I'm excited about is the fact that you and some of your friends are going to be here in June the 21st, 2025, on your Lead the Way tour. So, all right, really quickly, what is the Lead the Way tour all about?
Okay, it's a little strange. So, the Talbot School of Theology is the third largest multi-denominational seminary in the world. We're growing, and we've got this amazing faculty. So I wanted to create a tour where I could help get the word out about our amazing faculty. I mean, you're New Testament. You know some of our amazing New Testament folks. Clint Arnold just put out an 800-page volume on Colossians. So we've got these amazing people. So I literally got a Sprinter van. Didn't use tuition money. Donor, by the way. Took a Sprinter van. And I'm driving around doing pastors' conferences. And in the last 4 months, I've spoken to 10,000 pastors and church leaders, telling them about the cultural moment, how the moment we're in doesn't pause, the mission we're on. And I'm literally driving around in a Sprinter van. When I'm with you in Houston, Ed Stetzer will have driven the van across the Southwest. We're doing a stop in Dallas the day before.
Wow.
And show up, and I'm sleeping in the van on the way, and we're just having fun getting the word out about Talbot, making it fun.
So it's about Talbot, but it's also about the state of the church, where the church is
overwhelmingly
today.
So. Yeah, so I'm getting the word out the tour. But the whole focus is it's actually powered by the state of the church, which is this cooperative venture with Glue and Barna. But it's basically looking at the trends, the changes in religion. But I wrote an article in USA Today, and the New York Times also had a story about the shifts in religion, including increased attendance for Gen Z men. The State of the Bible, John Plake will be with us there at Lanier Theological Library. John's got the State of the Bible data, which is, again, showing shifts of interest towards the positive to Bible engagement, particularly among the young, particularly among young men. David Kinnaman will be there.
Wow.
He's going to talk about, every month, the Barna is releasing new research through the State of the Church. It's ChurchLeaders.com if people want to follow along. And Nicole Martin's going to be there. She's been tracking trends, talking about what's going on in culture. So this is why I love Lanier Theological Library. I've been doing most of these stops, just me. I got David Kinnaman to join some. but you brought the whole band. So we got John Plake from American Bible Society, Nicole Martin from Christianity Today. We got David Kinnaman from Barna, and me, your favorite motivational speaker, who's actually making a van down by the river.
I started to say we got a river not too far from here, so we could
exactly
we could let's just camp out down there. Now this is really exciting. There's some very interesting things happening, Ed, as you know, in culture right now. Some surprising things. We've had this trend about the growth of nuns for a number of years.
30 years.
30 years.
1% more Americans were nuns every year for 30 years until about 3 years ago.
And we've seen a different kind of trend happening. We don't want to give away what you're doing because we want people
there's
to come
plenty to
here.
say. There's plenty to say, so I'm not
Sure.
giving away much. There's a crisis of young men in our culture. There's a crisis in our culture in general. And one of the things we find is that when cultures go through tumultuous and turbulent times, people, they realize they're building their houses on sinking sand. So young men in particular, non-college educated young men in particular, there's a crisis in young men, and they're looking for something other than what they have now. And some of them are turning to really bad things like Andrew Tate and the hyper toxic masculinity and all the terribleness that is around Andrew Tate's name. Some of them return to Joe Rogan, not the same category, but some of them return to Joe Rogan. But here's the thing for me, I don't want them to be discipled by Joe Rogan. I want them to be discipled by the older men in churches that believe and teach the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that's also happening some as well. Let me give you an example. I'm going to unpack this more at the meeting. For the first time in the history of tracking religion research in America, more young men, Gen Z young men, are going to church than Gen Z young women.
Wow.
If the front page news wasn't just crazy every day, that would be on the front page of the news. Now, so there is a genuine increase in young men, but also young women are dropping out of church at a higher rate than we've seen before. So there's a bit of a bifurcation going on between young men and young women. So it's not all good news, but I'm going to talk about the rise of Bible sales. Wall Street Journal front page, 23% jump in Bible sales, mostly driven by first-time buyers. So there's definitely something going on in culture. And we've been friends long enough. We served together as Wheaton College as deans. And when I ran Lifeway Research, which was my job before I went to the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton, I did research. And I told people all the time, quit overreacting, quit saying this, just read the trends one at a time. Right now, the fact that the planning for State of the Church started in 2024, I'm just telling you, the data right now couldn't have been at a better time to get before pastors and tell them the story. So pastors, church leaders, interested Christians, we're going to unpack this. You're going to hear from four of us, which I think is unusual for what you do at Linear.
It's very unusual to bring in that many people for these talks. And the talks aren't going to be super long, 20, 25 minutes. And, we're going to have a lot of Q&A and a lot of opportunities for you guys to take questions together. And so it's going to be a great opportunity for church leaders, anybody at the helm of a church or who's a deacon in a church, maybe an elder at other churches, they could be a part of this as well. So we want them to know about it.
I just did Seattle, and we had a wonderful day. We had hundreds of pastors from the area. We're actually launching extension sites at a lot of these places. And then that night I spoke at the church, and I would say when I shared the information at the church, people were tracking around. Don't think that it's just for pastors and church leaders. This is data that's impacting all of us. The culture is kind of on fire. Okay. Many people are seeing failures of modernity. I was just on News Nation, that national cable show, and they were focused on Gen Z men. And the anchor asked, why do you think this is the case? Why are people more interested in religion? I said, because they're seeing modernity and its promises have failed them. Regardless of what you feel about the election or what you feel about the economy, whatever, you got to acknowledge the world's in global crisis right now. I just came from Indonesia. They actually have a hashtag Indonesia Gelap, which is Indonesian darkness. By the time this airs, I'll actually be in the UK teaching. And while I'm there, people will talk about, the UK is in trouble. And simultaneously, we have a brand new study that we'll unpack when we're there at Lanier. The UK is in trouble. And young men are turning to faith. So there's actually a study that came out from the Bible Society, the UK Bible Society. It's called the British and Foreign Bible Society is a technical term, but they did it with YouGov. YouGov, it's a respected polling firm. And they actually had the boldness to call it a quiet revival. There was so much shift in the data. Now they're starting at a lower level, but they called it the quiet revival, driven by young people and particularly young men. So I'm actually teaching next week on this topic. I have a course called Christianity and Contemporary Culture. And I had to change my notes because of the data that came out a month and a half ago in the UK. David, this is a crazy time. This is why I love we're talking about the state of the church. In God's providence, I get to go around, tell pastors and leaders. For 20 years, I've been doing this, and I've been telling people, yeah, it's a slow decline. Here are the challenges. And I'm like, this is one of the most opportune moments of our lifetime. We should seize that moment.
I know we need to do it. And you're one of the best guys I know in the world to do this, to announce it. And you've got quite a team that's coming. I'm super excited. Nicole Martin is coming back next year to do a talk for us in 2026. So I'm looking forward to having her back because she's been here for a panel discussion before a few years ago. So the bottom line is you're going to be here. You're going to be sharing some great news about the state of the church, not just for church leaders, but for people who are just super interested, because this is a cultural moment, as you said, that's impacting us all.
Yeah, it's unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime. The last time we saw the tumult and turbulence, the topsy-turvy religion data, was probably in the late 60s, early 70s, when the world sort of on fire last time. So there is a correlation. There's a correlation between convoluted times and gospel opportunity, and I think we want to seize that opportunity. And I want to be a part of helping prepare Christians and church leaders to do that very thing. Now, mind you, it's still in the context. You don't want to miss this. It's been 30 years of year by year decline. So 30 years, 1% less Christian, 1% less Christian, 1% less Christian. And the fact that that's plateaued and some groups, people are returned, it doesn't really mean that it's like back where it was 30 years ago. I'm hoping it's the beginning of something. In the talk, I'll describe the state of the culture in the church in 3 words: disrupted, precarious, and opportune. Because it's disrupted, that's obviously what's going on. It's precarious because, David, you and I have seen a lot of Christians and a lot of churches sort of lose their way the last few years, sort of get caught up in isms and to the left and to the right, instead of being driven by the good news of the gospel, sharing their faith, discipling believers, planting churches, global missions. Man, they're now caught up in an ism. They've been discipled by their cable news choices. They've been spiritually shaped by their social media. And so it's precarious. 3 words I use, right? It was disrupted, precarious, but then the third is it's opportune. There is a moment here that I don't want to look back 5 years from now and say the church didn't step up, stand out, stand in the gap, and show and share the love of Jesus. So that's the encouragement that I'll bring, but we got a lot of charts that help us to get there and a lot of Bible that helps us to understand the moment.
As you were speaking, I was reminded that I am a child of the Jesus Revolution movement back in the 70s and 80s, because a lot of things were happening back then. But that was on the tail end of Vietnam, the civil rights movement, the assassination of presidents and people like Martin Luther King Jr., as well as Bobby Kennedy. At that point, that was a very disrupted time. That became an opportune moment for people to turn back to the gospel. And I've met so many people along the way of my life, Ed, you probably have too, who came to faith during the Jesus movement itself.
Yeah. 20 to 30 million people, according to Donald Miller, not the cool guy who wrote Blue Like Jazz, but the scholar at USC, recently retired. 20 to 30 million people trace their spiritual heritage to the Jesus People movement. Now, look for just a second. History doesn't repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme. So look for just a second at 1968. You've already mentioned May 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King assassinated, Bobby Kennedy assassinated that year. Widespread protests around the Vietnam War, around the civil rights movement. Now think of 2020. Right? I think we're in the 51st month of 2020. It's been this whole tumult and turbulence for the last several years.
Wow.
So 2020, huge protests. In 1968, riots. 2020, riots. And here's one thing that people forget. There was a pandemic in 1968. Your parents would have called it the Hong Kong flu.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about all that in 1968 and think about that in 2020 to 2025. I'm recording this from Southern California, and about 10 miles from where I am right now, a pastor said to his daughter, I want to meet a hippie. And the daughter brings up a hippie. He loves Jesus. He's got a complicated story. And what we call the Jesus Revolution begins when Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee start a Bible study that has dozens, hundreds, thousands, and then 20 to 30 million people, including David Capes. But you know when all that started? When the world was on fire.
Yeah.
And I think we can acknowledge that that causes people to look, it also causes people to look for terrible things. Like, I mentioned young men with Andrew Tate,
Yeah.
but it also is an opportunity. I don't want to just give you stats. When we're together in Lanier, I just don't want to give you stats and charts. I want to also explain the gospel opportunity that's before us and how we navigate. How do we not end up getting caught up, or Paul writes about the Galatians being bewitched, like them being bewitched. How do we not end up bewitched and distracted from our gospel mission in the midst of the cultural convulsion we're walking through?
Yeah. You're right on when you say there are a lot of isms out there that we have gravitated to rather than the gospel, and we've got to get back to the gospel itself. I don't know of anybody better to lead the way at the Lead the Way tour for this than you and these other folks that are coming, David Kinnaman, John Plake, and Nicole Martin. It's going to be an exciting time. Ed, I'm so grateful. I know you got to head to Albania. I know you got to go to UK after that, and I'm excited for you to have those opportunities to speak broadly.
Appreciate you, brother. And I miss hanging out with you more. We need to start some theological education opportunities there in Houston, in addition to the wonderful ones you have.
Hey, we've got some great things already going, but we're looking to do more. I mean, we've got some great facilities, great resources. We just want to use them for the sake of the kingdom.
And if people don't know, the Lanier Theological Library is like crazy, and now has a partner. So I'm going to Albania, but then after that, I'm going to teach at Oxford, and I will be at the partner. What do you actually call it? The partner location in Oxford?
Yarnton Manor.
Yarnton Manor. I'll be staying at Yarnton Manor for the next 2 weeks while teaching at Oxford. So I'm so thankful for the Lanier focus, Mark himself, but also the Lanier Theological Library and all that you're doing. And if people haven't been there, they should. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get you here, and we're going to have a great time, and we're going to hopefully inspire another quiet revival.
Amen.
All right, brother. Have a great trip. See you next time.
Good to see you, man.
Bye-bye. It's always a lot of fun for me to talk with my former Wheaton colleague, Ed Stetzer. I caught him right before he boarded a flight for Albania. Okay, for those of you in and around Houston, June 21 is the date you need to know. Ed and his friends will be at the Lanier Theological Library for the Lead the Way tour. You can get information about that, dates, details, that kind of thing, at biola.edu/leadtheway. That's biola.edu/lead the way. We're going to start about 5:30 that evening and end about 9 o'clock. It's going to be an amazing night of information and inspiration from some of the best people that I know. If you can't be there, make sure you sign up to have that gathering streamed live to your phone and your computer that evening. Now, the Stone Chapel podcast is brought to you by the good people at the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. Thanks to my dear wife, Kathy Capes, who edits the podcast. Thanks to Jenna Firestone and Jessica Mauser for their production assistance. Phil Kege provides our music. Thank you, Phil. June 21, Lead the Way, Ed Stetzer. Remember that. Say it again. June 21, Lead the Way, Ed Stetzer. Remember that. Until next time, I'm David Capes. Thanks for listening.